Hey guys, welcome back to another Pickled Dragon Unscripted. Um, got a few things to share with you before we get started, but I have some questions here from some nice folks, some nice gamers that need answering. But as always, first we're going to do a little bit of sharing. So I got this in the as a birthday gift from my excellent wife. Oh, it's this World Eater Hydra Icons of the Realm deal, and it's the Theros set of miniatures, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, which is just basically Greek mythology. Uh, it's based on the Magic the Gathering, but set in a now D&D world. So basically, if you're gonna and what people told me, I haven't bought the book myself, but what people told me is if you enjoy Greek mythology, you'd probably enjoy the book. But what I enjoy are good miniatures. And I'm going to come in a little closer. Big five-headed Hydra. Now, I believe Hydras are a huge monster, if I'm not mistaken, huge size category, which put him on a 3x3 base. This guy's on a 4x4 base, so he's a bit bigger. But in any case, he's still pretty darn awesome. Um, I'm gonna put him away for a second. I really love the Hydra as a monster. Um, I I I enjoyed it more in third edition. There was a little caption in third edition where it said, "This monster is particularly difficult, but it's meant to be. It's supposed to challenge players kind of outside of the box thinking." Or reward players for outside of the box thinking for how to defeat the creature because they were so tough. And it all had to do with attacks of opportunity. Um, in third edition, you got attacks of opportunity for closing with a monster with reach. Whereas in 5e, you only get attacks of opportunity for retreating. So with the Hydra, the way it was, when you closed with it, you provoked from every single one of its heads. Pow, pow, pow. So if it had 8 heads, it's 8 attacks of opportunity. So it made the creature incredibly difficult. Now that's been taken away in 5e. However, I still kind of do a little bit of a hybrid with the Hydra, and I like to give it extra reactions, give it a chance to make a few extra attacks here and there because it's a solitary creature for the most part, and most DMs will tell you that when you throw a solitary creature um, against a party, the economy of action is just the party's got so many more actions than that creature. So if solitary creatures tend to get just blown to pieces unless they have something a little bit extra special to soup them up, if you will. So I really enjoy kind of altering my builds of Hydras to give it a little something extra for the players to have to navigate around. So just my 2 cents on the Hydra because I do love the monster so much. And the miniature is great. I'm not I'm not too happy with the rest of the miniatures from that set. Thought the paint jobs were not so good. Kind of down there with the Dragon Heist Waterdeep miniature paint sets. I don't know if you've ever looked, but you know, um, they're just not up to par. Now some sets come out and you're just blown away by the paint jobs. And granted, pre-painted miniatures are generally just not as good as ones you paint by hand, but there's a definite when you go through the different sets, and I don't know if it's something that Wizards of the Coast or Paizo pays for, like this particular set we're going to have like a C class paint job, and this one we're going to have an A class paint job, or how it works. But some sets, they just have a much much higher quality pre-painted job than um, than other sets. I don't know how to account for it, but the Hydra looks great, so there's that. But the other miniatures, I'm not particularly fond of. I used to back, 2003 was the first year that pre-painted miniatures came out, and I started buying cases of miniatures right off the bat. So I'd get complete sets, tons of extras, every set came out. And then around 4th edition, I stopped. And I would just kind of pick and choose what I wanted to buy at that point. Because you end up with so many miniatures that you don't, how many more orcs do you need? I already have several hundred orcs. So going forward, I have to admit, I have bought cases of some sets in recent years, but most I just kind of pick and choose the ones I want. And from Theros, I think there was like 4 or 5 models. I just kind of wanted one of each, and and the rest I kind of left there. But some of you guys might love might love those models. So I'm not gonna tell anyone, don't buy this. You're gonna want to go check it out for yourself. And you could Google it, and I'm sure you get screenshots of each, what they look like, and go to a place like Miniature Market or Troll and Toad and just get onesies and twosies, or a whole case if you want, whatever. But in any case, we're kind of off the map, if you will. Now, the other thing I want to share, I haven't talked about this in a long time. The Monstrous Lexicon, was a book that I wrote with Kelsey Dion, the arcane librarian herself. We got together and we decided we wanted to make our own monster manual. There's like 70 new monsters in the Monstrous Lexicon. You can get the hardcover on Amazon, or you can get a PDF on DriveThruRPG. But I wanted to share it because I recently talked to several people who have been using it and they really enjoy it. And I was just talking about how I like to alter my hydras to give them a little bit more oomph and a little bit more flavor, if you will. And it got me thinking about all of the work that Kelsey and I did on the Monstrous Lexicon. And one of the things that I like to bring to my monsters is not only a surprise element, like, oh my God, where'd that come from, but kind of a logical element to it. So, if you are a huge giant, why is it that giants can't just like pick up a character and just throw them as far as they could possibly go? So, for example, I've got here the Gog Magog, which is when a frost giant and a hill giant get together and get busy. The offspring is known as a Gog Magog. And they have a number of special abilities. They can crush. They can pick up a party member and just crush them in their hands. Or they could throw the party member at another party member. They can punt, stomp, and they have an ability called Large and in Charge, which it can exchange one of its Great Club attacks to throw its weight around the battlefield, so to speak. And the whole idea behind the Gog Magog was it brought together a number of elements that I use with all of my giants, whether they're hill giants or frost giants or fire giants. Pitch and punt and stomp and crush and all these are all things I already allow my giants to do. So it's interesting when you sit down and you think, a creature that big, what kind of things can you bring to your table that would surprise your players, but that also kind of make logical sense that it should be able to do that. It's not just something you're plucking out of the air, But yeah, the Monstrous Lexicon's out there, and it's just filled with ideas that Kelsey and I came up with. And, one of the things that I thought was we had a lot of fun doing is, if you look at the cover, there are, the glare, if I can get it to work here. There are 2 adventurers there on the cover. And one is a wizard named Rin, and that was supposed to represent Kelsey. And then my character was Borg Thorvald. And if you go through the monsters, you'll see, like, here's the Lindworm. There's a little picture of Rin and Borg, and we each make comments on the monster as you go through. So it was just a little thing that we had fun with. Some of the, a lot of the little comments were meant to be humorous. I hope they're humorous. I hope we just don't look foolish during the thing. But in any case, we had tons and tons of fun working with artists, putting together a book that captured kind of the old school feel of that first and second ed black and white art. We kind of wanted to grab that old school feel of art and put together a book of monsters that really could inspire a DM to kind of think outside the box and do more with their game. And there is stuff. There's 4 playable races in here as well. So if you're a player, there's something for you as well. There's the Gruleshi. It's funny, the timing that we released this book at the same time that I think it was the Ravnica book came out. And there's like the elephant race and there's the Minotaur race that came out. Well, we've got our own Minotaur. We got 2 sub races of Minotaur. We've got the Gruleshi, which is like an elephant race, but they can grow multiple trunks. The Grugach, which is an offshoot of like gnomes, and the Lupine. They're the wolf lords. So it was gives you a little something for players and a lot of cool stuff for DMs as well. So I hope you guys check out the Monsters Lexicon. Again, you can get the PDF on DriveThruRPG, hardcover out there on Amazon. I'm gonna set that aside, out of the way. So questions that need answering. The first one, they ask, I would like to hear how you navigate a player in a group that constantly tends to do outright evil actions and causes strife between other players. That's a difficult question because is it the player or is it the character? If it's the player that tends to consistently cause problems, that's a difficult question and I think, we've all been there. We've all had problem players. But many times, your group consists of your circle of friends. And, you're not going to just kick out a friend out of the group. Now, if this is a group, say, 6 people at a game store and you're all strangers, I would leave it to the DM to come to that player and say, listen, you're causing problems at the table. You got to decide. We're running a heroic campaign, and you're doing this. If you want to play an evil character, maybe a different table's for you. But this is what we're going to do. And you could even do that with a friend. You could say, listen, we all want to run the game this way, and you are causing a lot of problems. If it's a joke, it's one thing. If it's a character concept, it's another. Because there are such things as, say, the helm of opposite alignment. So you could suddenly find yourself evil, and then it's a role playing issue. And if it's simply a matter of role playing, what you need to do is have consequences in your game. You can't just let them do all these evil acts and que sera, it's off to the next town and off to, there are barons and lords and guards and, other good aligned party or heroes and wizards that who seek to do good and persecute evil. You have to have consequences in your game. So if a character, murders somebody in town, does the whole murder hobo thing, well, even if they're high level, they're not the only high level character or hero in the world. You know, you could bring the hammer down. This Duke has hired this group to bring this person to justice, and the rest of the party members need to decide at that point. Well, do we defend this villainous cat, or do we bring help bring him to justice, or would he step back and say, you know what, you brought this on yourself? Um, so again, I mean, it's a question of, is it the player or is it the character that's the issue? Now, normally it sounds like what this person is asking is about a player that's causing problems, and in that case, you got to either talk to them, you got to confront them, and say, listen, something's got to change. I don't know what that's going to be, and I don't think it's, if you have a table of 6 and there's one guy that wants to steer the party to chaos and the rest of them want a heroic campaign, well, um, you know, it's going to be up to the one to change, or maybe they need to find a different table. If it's a character situation or it's a character concept, you got to have consequences. My best example is at a table I had. I had a player who was used to running one shots. It's the, I don't know if you may not know the example of Babylon 5 was one of my favorite sci-fi series. Babylon 5 was, a story. Every episode built on the next one. Whereas Star Trek, if you watch Star Trek, most episodes, not all, but most episodes are condensed, a one shot, if you will, and the next episode starts over, and whatever happened yesterday or last week on Star Trek really didn't have much of a bearing on this week. But whatever the case, excuse me, excuse me, this player was used to running one shots, and he joined our group. And of course, my tables are very story driven, so we're building a story, one session to the next, builds, and he contracted lycanthropy. Excuse me, sorry. So he contracts lycanthropy, and I can remember that one of my players contacted me. She said, I called him and I said, you need to get this lycanthropy dealt with. And his answer was, it's not that big of a deal. Well, I, of course, remembered that he was a werewolf. And so the night of the first full moon, he changed and he massacred some farmer's family, ate them all or whatever, tore them up. Well, the local baron used divination magic, his court wizard used divination magic to track the murderer. And of course, it led directly to this character. And at the time, I remember I had one player whose character had just died. So they were coming in to do a session with a brand new character. I said, this session, you're not going to control your new character. You're going to control the Baron. And you've got these number of troops, and you've got this wizard, a diviner, and you're going to go arrest this character for murdering this farmer's family. And the rest of the party is going to do what they will. The rest of the party had no idea this was about to happen. So when the Baron comes riding in with his men, the rest of the party just kind of backed off. They were like, we don't want a part of this. So he was on his own, and he was arrested and thrown in the clink. And the local priest came and removed his lycanthropy because he had made his first save, so it wasn't permanent yet. But he had a choice: pay for the resurrection of each and every person he killed. There was 5 total, so it was an enormous amount of gold, or stay in prison. And so he had to basically sell every magic item he owned to raise the gold to get his character out of prison. And it wasn't a small thing. I mean, he was like 7th level at the time, I think. I mean, they had accumulated quite a lot of wealth, and it basically cleaned him out. So when I say consequences, those are some real world, well, real fantasy world consequences. But it also gave him an out to keep his character. In that case, a neutral aligned or even evil aligned Baron may not even have given him a choice. Fortunately, they were in a land where the Baron was good aligned, and so he was willing, you resurrect these people, you make right, and we will, give you your freedom, but you got to make it right. So he was able to keep his character, but there were consequences. So that's what I mean by consequences. When somebody does a terrible thing in the game, they need to be held accountable. Otherwise, they're just going to keep doing it. So that's the long way around answering that question. So I hope you guys concur. So, would love to know your ranking of the best mini companies. That's a very tough question because 3D printing has become such a huge thing. And there are some companies doing some startups, brand new companies doing some absolutely stunning work when it comes to miniatures. The first one that comes to mind, and I mean, I could talk about WizKids, and I talked about WizKids at the beginning, all their pre-painted stuff, and of course they're producing the Nolzers and the deep cuts, pre-primered stuff. There's always Reaper, who I have the utmost respect for what the Reaper is doing. They have a huge line. Their miniatures are very fairly priced, and they have really great deals on shipping. If you go to their website, shipping worldwide, if you buy enough, they'll give it to you. They'll ship it to you for free. So yeah, I mean, things like I've shared this one in the past. This is a Reaper model. That's beautiful. It's a little drow queen on her throne. If I can get it to focus there, nice, pretty model. And there's this guy on his throne. This is Reaper Bones, and I think the other one was called like Reaper Black or something like that. But I can't get him to focus. Anyway, let me block my face off, and maybe he'll focus. Well, in any case, you guys get the idea. But to give you an example of models that are being 3D printed, a lot of you probably recognize this model. A wonderful company called Faux-Bender 3D. They have some amazing stuff coming out. And they're not the only ones. I mean, they're the ones that come to mind. Faux-Bender 3D. They come to mind. We got Krituk. I can't really pronounce their name very well, but they have some amazing models like Terrarask models and T-Rexes and some bigger stuff. They have some great stuff. But, I mean, there's tons of them out there. The explosion of 3D printers has opened the market up, just blown the door off the market. So ranking them is very difficult. So I guess if I had to rank, the miniature companies, obviously WizKid, if I just stuck to the big three, which to me is like Paizo, Wizards of the Coast, and those two are both using WizKids, and then Reaper. In terms of the models that I use the most and I enjoy the most, I really like Paizo's pre-painted miniatures. Wizards of the Coast are good. God, it's really hard to rank these because, with Wizards of the Coast, you're going to be getting models that are the official, if you want a particular nasty evil orc, well, and you want it to look like the orc that's in the monster manual, you're going to want to go to WotC. Paizo, they have some really cool, interesting models. But one of the things I like about Reaper, though, is that it really has inspired me to create a lot of my own monsters. So they have models out there that, will blow your socks off, things that you've never seen before. And then your imagination starts turning. What could something like this do? You start using that logic. Boy, I'm going to have to cry mercy on this question. Ranking of the best mini companies is hard, especially now the way 3D printing has blown everything up. And I imagine in the next just few years, it's going to get even tighter and tighter and harder. Obviously, with 3D printing, you're going to have to paint them all yourself, which not everybody has that ability, but not everybody cares. There are plenty of tables out there that are throwing down minis that are unpainted, no problem. Which reminds me of a funny story. Many, many years ago at a con, there was a DM that would not allow your character to be healed if your mini was unpainted. So I believe what one of the players did was they when they found out that this DM was like this, they ran to McDonald's, who at the time had a line of toys in their Happy Meals, and I'm trying to remember what the toy was. I want to say Hello Kitty, but it wasn't Hello Kitty. But he bought a Happy Meal and got this toy, and it was painted. And when he went back to the game, he plopped it on the table, and he's like, "I'm painted. I can be healed." And caused a little bit of friction. But the DM was overly serious about his job in any case. So yeah, that's an aside. But all right. How do you spice up combat and keep it from lagging as they sometimes tend to do? What makes more the best combat scenes in your opinion? Well, to me, what makes the best combat is a combat that has surprise value. So we are already talking about adding abilities, reactions, actions, features to monsters that players are not expecting. So, if you've got a hobgoblin, you could give him something like a parry reaction. That's kind of, a snoozer, But maybe it's a commander, and as a reaction, he can give a command to allow certain troops to make a disengage action, or so many times per charisma modifier, or something unexpected like that. So suddenly the battlefield is moving around, and that is one of the very first things that you want to do when you want to make an interesting combat. Is you don't want the combat to stagnate. In other words, bad guys rush in, good guys rush in, and whatever line is formed, it doesn't tend to move very much. You need to have dynamic combats where things are moving around a lot. And, of course, the way attacks of opportunity are arranged, neither side is generally going to want to take that chance to move, right? So what you have to do is introduce things or elements into the game, into the combat that force movement. So you might have things like an earthquake, natural disasters, volcanoes are erupting, there's lava flows. Players have to think about more things than just the monsters and force movement around. So if a lava flow is moving through, or there is a volcano erupting and there's pumice pummeling the ground and people are having to scatter around, meanwhile the fight's going on, or it's a terrible thunderstorm, there's rain whipping around, the wind is so intense that makes ranged combat impossible. Introduce factors that force people to have to move around a lot. And it will keep players thinking at the table about their next move rather than going, is it my turn next? You gotta keep the players interested because, and by interested I mean engaged. What's going to happen next? Um, so keep the combats going. Introduce natural hazards outside of the monsters themselves, and make sure that the monsters can fall prey to this too. Maybe you have a few extra baddies in there that you intend on having the natural disaster take out, and that way uh, it can feel a little bit more intense and a little bit more unpredictable. Um, you know, and it's not at all a terrible thing to introduce a combat that the players should be able to recognize that they can't win, that they should flee from. Now, there's a lot of tables, I've seen a lot of tables, and I've experienced this where they think that if there's a combat, they should be able to win it. And that's not always the case. Building a combat where the players have to perform a skilled retreat, and they have to recognize that they need to perform a skilled retreat, can be also interesting. So rather than having to rush into combat, you've got a table or a battle board or a theater of their mind set up where they have to fall back and run. And there's always going to be that one player. Keep in mind, there's always going to be that one player that has a vision of their character making a daring last stand and giving his life to save the others. And that's what they want to do. That's up to them. But before you do something like that, just remember that. Or maybe the players rush in thinking, well, if the DM put it out there, we should be able to win it. Well, that's not always the case. So that's the biggest advice. A couple pieces of advice that I could give to make for an interesting combat where people aren't falling asleep. Give monsters unexpected abilities, have some natural hazards in their way, and really challenge them tactically to make the decision: are we going to stand and fight, or are we going to run? So, but in other words, in any case, keep it running. All right. So, last question we'll go through today. Talk about min-maxing and your personal thoughts about it. How it can affect games and campaigns. I've had players at my table who just glaze over until combat hits. And then they're like, just it's time to kill, and then they're out of combat and they just kind of glaze over again, and they wait till all the role playing is done and everything's done, and they don't pay attention. Maybe they're on their phone or talking or whatever until combat hits, and then it's like, I'm in, it's time to kill stuff. And those are the players that tend to be the min-maxers, at least my experience. I'm not saying min-maxers at all can't enjoy role-playing. But from my experience, those are the players who tend to role-play the most, and they're not very engaged with the story. And, that's fine. That's fine. That's how they want to play the game. But what min-maxers can do is they can create characters. Even in 5e, I've heard so much about how 5e is so balanced, but I use the +1 rule. It means you get the player's handbook and one other source only to build your character. And that's it. So, if a new source comes out and you've already got your 1+, you're stuck. And I think that controls min-maxing quite a bit. But if you don't play a game like that, and you can end up with some pretty crazy builds in 5e, I've got +15 to damage for this attack, and, just some crazy, crazy stuff. Well, if you have a player like that who's just pummeling everything in its way, and then you have a group of players who maybe don't play that way, in order to challenge that player, you got to amp it up a little bit, which could which could have consequences for your other players. So min-maxing, while I don't have a problem, play the way you want to play. I don't care. But as a DM, I've got to be able to challenge you. And if you're going to min-max and the other players aren't necessarily doing that, and I turn up the volume to challenge that player, you can think about what could go wrong. But, at that point, it's up to the other players to kind of navigate those minds, I guess. I'm one that I want to challenge the players, both in a role-playing sense and in a combat sense and a story sense. I really want to challenge them. I don't want there to be, one combat after another where they just pummel everything in sight. I don't think that's very much fun, and I don't think it might be fun for a combat or two. I've seen a few combats where I've thrown a horde of ghouls and somebody makes a really lucky roll and just wipes them out with a turn undead, and it's over before it started, and it's fine. And everyone's laughing and having a good time. But imagine that happening over and over again. That wouldn't be very much fun. So, when you do have to DM with a min-maxer, you got to you just have to turn the volume up. Boy, all these questions, they keep going back to adding surprises, how to build that memorable combat. I've seen min-maxers taken out by the terrain hazards I've put out there, and they just was like, I wasn't thinking about that, or having to worry more than just about the monster can put players in a bind like you've never seen. But in any case, again, I don't really care if someone min-maxes. It's a little less fun for me, but however people want to play the game and have fun, that's up to them. It's because that's what it's all about, is having fun. But that said, it's not really my cup of tea. But however you want to play is fine. So that's about all I got for this week. I didn't have one last week. I was a little under the weather last week, and so we skipped last week. But hopefully have another one for you next week. I've got I have the giveaway where I've partnered with Noble Knight Games. We've got the Hydra miniature, the Green Dragon miniature, the Hag miniature, a copy of the Prison of Kos being given away, along with a $25 gift card, virtual gift card, to the Noble Knight Games website. Noble Knight, again, they have all kinds of board games, RPG stuff, miniatures, all manner of cool stuff, including the old TSR, source books, and adventures. So it's definitely an amazing giveaway, amazing opportunity. I suggest that you check out Noble Knight, www.nobleknight.com. You can check out all their what they have in stock. If you want to enter the giveaway, go to my Instagram, find my post where I have the little banner about the giveaway, and you can see all the details on how to enter there. But in the meantime, happy gaming, and as always, be heroic.